Taewon adjusted his human form as he walked through Seoul's busy diplomatic corridor. His skin still felt too tight, even after 3 Earth months. The Dragon King had taken the shape of a tall, lean man with sharp features and dark hair that fell just above his shoulders. To human eyes, he looked like any other diplomat in his perfectly pressed suit. But beneath this disguise was a being older than most human civilizations. Earth was the newest addition to the Galactic Alliance, and Taewon had volunteered to serve as the first dragon representative. His people rarely left their home system, but something about humans had caught his interest. They were so young, so eager, and so remarkably adaptable. The afternoon sun warmed his face as he passed the towering glass buildings that housed various alien embassies. He was heading back to his quarters after a long meeting about trade routes when he heard a sound that cut through the city noise like a blade. A child's cry. Taewon stopped mid-step. Something ancient stirred inside him. Dragons had always had a special connection to the young of any species. It was written into their very being, a protective instinct older than memory. This wasn't just any cry. This was the sound of true fear and loneliness. He turned his head, focusing his senses. Human ears were dull compared to his true form, but he had other ways of perceiving. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting his awareness expand beyond the human shell. There, 3 blocks away, down an alley. Without thinking, Taewon changed direction. His long legs carried him swiftly through the crowd. Humans and aliens alike moved out of his way, perhaps sensing something unusual in his purposeful stride. The crying grew louder as he approached a narrow space between the buildings. It was a small service alley, clean but rarely used. Taewon slowed his pace and peered. Into the shadows, a little girl sat huddled against the wall. She couldn't be more than 6 years old, with round cheeks wet with tears and small hands clutching a worn stuffed animal that looked like Earth's extinct pandas. Her dark hair was tied into uneven pigtails, and her school uniform was slightly rumpled. "Hello there," Taewon said softly, keeping his distance so as not to frighten her further. "Are you lost?" The girl looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and lingering fear. She nodded slowly. "My name is Taewon. I work at the big building with the blue glass." He pointed in the direction of the diplomatic center. "What's your name?" "Jiwoo," she whispered, clutching her toy tighter. "That's a beautiful name, Jiwoo. Can you tell me how you got here?" Jiwoo wiped her nose with her sleeve. There was a loud noise. Everyone was running. "Miss Park told us to hold hands, but someone pushed me, and then I couldn't find her or my class." Taewon nodded. There had been an emergency drill that morning, standard procedure for all buildings in the diplomatic zone. Someone had clearly failed to notice that a child had been separated from her group. "Your teacher must be very worried about you," he said, crouching down to her level but still keeping a respectful distance. "Would you like me to help you find her?" Jiwoo studied him with the careful consideration that only children can manage. "My mom says not to go with strangers." "Your mom is very wise," Taewon said with a smile. "How about this? We can stay right here, and I can call someone to help us find your teacher or your parents. Would that be okay?" After a moment's thought, Jiwoo nodded. Taewon pulled out his communication device, a slim rectangle that humans might mistake for a phone. He could have contacted emergency services, but something told him to dig deeper. He accessed the diplomatic database, searching for information on local schools that might have visited the area today. "What's your full name, Jiwoo?" "Jiwoo Park," she said, watching him curiously. A few more taps, and Taewon found what he was looking for. "Is your father's name Doyeon Park? And your mother is Minji Lee?" Jiwoo's eyes widened. "How did you know that?" Taewon smiled. "It's my job to know things." "Your parents work on something very important, don't they?" The girl nodded proudly. "They make stars talk to each other. That's what Mom says." Taewon knew exactly who they were now. Doyeon Park and Minji Lee were leading scientists on Earth's first faster-than-light communication project, a technology that would revolutionize humanity's place in the galaxy if successful. Their work was classified, but well-known in diplomatic circles. "That sounds amazing," he said, sending a message to both the school and the parents. "I've let your teacher know you're safe. She's very relieved." Jiwoo's shoulders relaxed slightly. Can I go home now? Soon, Taewon promised. Someone is coming to get you. While they waited, Taewon sat down against the opposite wall, giving the child space. That's a nice panda you have. His name is Bomb, Jiwoo said, holding up the stuffed toy. He's brave, I can see that, Taewon replied. You know, where I come from, we have animals that look a little like pandas, but they have scales instead of fur. Jiwoo's eyes grew wide with interest. Like lizards? A bit like that, yes. Taewon felt something warm spread through his chest, an unfamiliar feeling. Dragons rarely interacted with children of any species. It was considered too risky, given their natural protective bonds could form too quickly. Now he understood why. There was something about this human child that called to the most ancient part of him. 20 minutes later, a harried-looking woman in a teacher's uniform rushed into the alley, followed by a security officer. Jiwoo, thank goodness, the woman knelt and checked the girl over. I've been so worried. Your parents are on their way. Taewon stood and introduced himself with his diplomatic credentials. The teacher thanked him profusely while the security officer took notes about the incident. Just as they were finishing, two people rushed into the alley, a man and woman, both wearing lab coats. The woman's hair was coming loose from its bun, and the man's glasses sat crooked on his nose. Jiwoo, they called in unison. Mommy, Daddy. The girl ran to them, and they swept her into a tight embrace. Taewon watched the family reunion, feeling that strange warmth again. The mother, Minji, looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Thank you for finding her, she said. We came as soon as we could. It was no trouble, Taewon replied. Your daughter is very brave. Doyeon stood and bowed deeply. We are in your debt, sir. As Taewon watched the family leave, he felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. A pull, a connection. Dragons were solitary by nature, but they were also guardians. And something about this family, about little Jiwoo, had awakened that ancient instinct within him. He knew he should report this encounter to his superiors. Contact with human children was strictly regulated. But as he walked back to his quarters, Taewon decided this would be his secret, at least for now. He didn't realize that this chance meeting would change not only his life, but the course of human-dragon relations forever. 3 days after finding Jiwoo in the alley, Taewon couldn't stop thinking about the child and her family. He had accessed their files, a simple matter for someone with his diplomatic clearance, and learned more about their situation. Doyeon and Minji were brilliant scientists working 16-hour days on Earth's most important project. Their research on faster-than-light communication could change humanity's place in the galaxy. If humans could talk instantly across star systems, they would no longer be the newcomers begging for attention. They would become equals. But this important work came at a cost. The files showed that Jiwoo spent most of her time with a rotating cast of babysitters and after-school programs. The family's apartment was small, tucked into the crowded science district. Their finances were stretched thin by medical bills. Doyeon's mother was sick and needed special care. Taewon stood by the window of his diplomatic quarters, looking out at the Seoul skyline as night fell. He shouldn't care this much about one human family. It wasn't proper for a dragon king. His people valued distance and objectivity when dealing with younger species. Yet he couldn't forget the look in Jiwoo's eyes. His communication device chimed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from the Dragon Council, asking for his weekly report. Taewon sighed. He should focus on his actual duties. Just as he was about to begin his report, an alert flashed across his screen. There had been an accident at the science complex where Doyeon and Minji worked. Nothing serious, a minor power failure, but all personnel had been evacuated. Before he could question his own judgment, Taewon was already heading for the door. He found them outside the complex, Doyeon looking frustrated, Minji on her phone, and Jiwoo sitting on a bench, swinging her legs and looking bored. The girl spotted him first. Mr. Taewon, she called out, waving enthusiastically. Her parents turned, surprise clear on their tired faces. Ambassador, Doyeon said with a respectful bow. What brings you here? Taewon smiled. I was nearby when I heard about the evacuation. I wanted to make sure everyone was safe. It wasn't entirely a lie. That's very kind, Minji said, though her expression showed confusion. Why would a dragon diplomat care about a routine evacuation? Jiwoo had no such questions. She hopped off the bench and approached him. Did you come to see me? Jiwoo, her father warned gently. The ambassador is a very important person. He's busy. Actually, Taewon said, I was hoping to speak with all of you. He looked at the parents. Your work on the FTL communication project is of great interest to the Galactic Alliance. This wasn't what he had planned to say, but it served as a good excuse. Doyeon and Minji exchanged glances. We're not authorized to discuss the project outside of approved channels. Doyeon said carefully. Of course, Taewon nodded. But perhaps we could speak more generally. I understand you've had some funding challenges. Minji's eyebrows rose. How did you? It's getting late, Taewon said, noticing Jiwoo trying to hide a yawn. Perhaps I could offer you a ride home, and we could talk on the way. The scientists hesitated, but the prospect of avoiding the crowded public transport with a tired child proved tempting. They accepted. In Taiwan's diplomatic vehicle, a sleek, silent car that hovered slightly above the road. Jiwoo quickly fell asleep against her mother's side. The parents spoke quietly about their work, careful not to reveal classified details, but clearly desperate for someone to understand their challenges. The theory is sound, Doyeon explained, but the power requirements are enormous, and the materials we need are rare, even across the galaxy. Minji added, we've requested samples from 3 different star systems, but the bureaucracy is slow. Taewon finished for her. Yes, the Alliance can be cautious with new members. The car pulled up to their apartment building, a tall, narrow structure, packed tightly among others like it. Doyeon carefully lifted his sleeping daughter. Thank you for the ride, Ambassador, he said softly. Taewon made a quick decision. May I come up for a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss further. The apartment was small but neat. Jiwoo's drawings covered the refrigerator, and stacks of scientific journals sat on every surface. Doyeon put Jiwoo to bed while Minji made tea. Your daughter is very special, Taewon said as they sat around the tiny kitchen table. Minji smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. She is. We wish we could spend more time with her. Your work is important, Taewon said. But so is she. We know, Doyeon sighed. It's just temporary. Once the project reaches the next phase. Taewon took a deep breath. What he was about to do went against all dragon protocols. There's something I want to show you. Both of you. But first, I need your word that what happens in this room stays between us. The scientists looked at each other, then nodded cautiously. I am not exactly what I appear to be, Taewon said. He held out his hand, palm up, and concentrated. Slowly, his skin began to shimmer. The human flesh faded, revealing scales that gleamed like polished metal. His fingers elongated slightly, and small claws emerged where nails had been. The transformation was minor, just his hand, nothing more, but it was enough. Minji gasped. Doyeon's mouth fell open. You're really a… Doyeon couldn't finish the sentence. A dragon, yes, Taewon said, allowing his hand to return to human form. What you know of my kind is mostly correct. We are ancient, powerful, and very private. We rarely involve ourselves directly in the affairs of other species. Then why show us? Minji asked, her scientific mind already working through the implications. Because I want to help your family, Taewon said simply. Your work is more important than you know, and your daughter. He paused. Dragons have always had a connection to the young. It's part of our nature to protect them. You want to protect Jiwoo? Doyeon asked, understandably suspicious. I want to help all of you, Taewon clarified. I can arrange for those material samples you need. I can cut through the Alliance bureaucracy. And perhaps, sometimes when you need to work late, you want to babysit our daughter? Minji asked incredulously. Taewon smiled. I was thinking more along the lines of a friend who visits occasionally, someone who can tell her stories about the stars while her parents change the galaxy. The scientists were silent for a long moment. This is highly irregular, Doyeon finally said. It is. Taewon agreed. If my people knew, they would not approve. But sometimes, the right decision is not the one in the rule book. From the hallway, came a small voice. "Daddy, who are you talking to?" They turned to see Jiwoo standing in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Ambassador Taewon is visiting," Minji said gently. Jiwoo walked over and looked up at Taewon with sleepy eyes. "Are you really a dragon?" she asked. The adults froze. She had been listening. Taewon looked at her parents, who gave small, uncertain nods. He leaned down to Jiwoo's level. "Yes," he said softly. "But it's a secret. Can you keep a secret?" Jiwoo nodded solemnly. "Can I see?" Taewon held out his hand and let the scales appear again. Jiwoo's eyes widened with wonder. "Not fear. Beautiful," she whispered, reaching out to touch his transformed hand. In that moment, as the child's small fingers brushed against ancient scales, Taewon knew he had made a decision that would change everything for this family, for himself, and perhaps for both their species. Over the next 2 months, Taewon became a regular visitor to the Park family apartment. His first visit after revealing his true nature had been awkward. Doyeon and Minji were still processing the fact that an ancient dragon king was sitting on their worn couch, drinking tea from their chipped mugs, but Jiwoo had no such reservations. To her, Taewon was simply her new friend who happened to be a dragon. "Will you tell me a story about the stars?" she asked one evening while her parents worked late in their home office. Taewon smiled. "What kind of story would you like to hear?" "A true one," Jiwoo said, her eyes serious. "About real places." So Taewon told her about the crystal forests of Altair, where the trees grew from living gemstones and sang when the twin moons rose. He described the floating cities of the Mira system, where an entire civilization lived among the clouds. He spoke of the great space whales that swam between stars, carrying ancient knowledge in their songs. What he didn't tell her was that he had been to all these places, that he had watched some of them rise from nothing and others fall into dust. Dragons lived for thousands of years, and Taewon was old even by their standards. From the doorway, Minji watched them, a small smile on her tired face. "She's never taken to anyone so quickly," she said later, after Jiwoo had gone to bed. "Not even her teachers or her cousins. Children often see more clearly than adults." Taewon replied, "They haven't learned to doubt their instincts yet." Doyeon joined them, carrying a stack of research papers. "The materials you helped us acquire arrived today," he said. "Our project director couldn't believe it. He asked if we had friends in high places." He laughed softly. "The highest," Minji added with a smile. Taewon nodded modestly. "I merely suggested to the right people that Earth's FTL communication project deserved priority." What he didn't mention was that he had called in several ancient favors and made promises that would take decades to fulfill. The Dragon Council would not approve, but Taewon had been careful to keep his actions quiet. As the weeks passed, Taewon found himself drawn deeper into the family's life. He attended Jiwoo's school performance, sitting awkwardly among the human parents. He brought special treats from across the galaxy, carefully disguised as Earth foods. He listened to Doyeon and Minji's research problems and offered subtle suggestions based on technologies he had seen on 100 worlds. One evening, as Taewon was teaching Jiwoo how to draw the constellations as seen from his home world, his communication device chimed with an urgent tone. "Excuse me," he said. Stepping into the hallway to answer, the stern face of Elder Suho, head of the Dragon Council, appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Taewon, your monthly reports have been lacking in detail, and there are rumors that you have been spending time among humans outside of your diplomatic duties." Taewon kept his face neutral. "I have been building relationships that will benefit our people, Elder, with scientists working on FTL communication," Suho said, his ancient eyes narrowing. "And their child." A cold feeling settled in Taewon's stomach. "I was not aware that my activities were being monitored so closely." "You are a king among our kind, Taewon. Your actions reflect on all dragons." The elder's voice softened slightly. "We understand the pull of the young. It is in our nature, but you must remember your position. Humans are still new to the galactic community. They must find their own path." "Of course, Elder," Taewon said, bowing his head respectfully. "The council expects you to distance yourself from this family," Suho continued. "Your primary duty is to the diplomatic mission. After the call ended, Taewon stood in the hallway for a long moment. The elder was right. He had allowed himself to become too involved. It wasn't proper for a dragon of his standing. He returned to the living room to find Jiwoo had fallen asleep on the couch. Her star drawings scattered around her. Minji was gently covering her with a blanket. "Is everything okay?" she asked, noticing his troubled expression. "Yes," Taewon lied. "Just diplomatic matters." Later that night, after leaving the park's apartment, Taewon walked through the quiet streets of Seoul. The city never truly slept. But at this late hour, there was a peaceful quality to the glowing lights and occasional passing cars. He should obey the counsel. He should step back from this human family and focus on his duties. It was the proper thing to do. But as he walked, Taewon remembered the look on Jiwoo's face when he showed her how stars were born. He thought of the dark circles under Minji's eyes that had begun to fade as their work progressed with his help. He recalled how Doyeon stood taller now, confident that his life's work might actually succeed. 3 days later, Taewon received a message from Doyeon. The FTL project had reached a critical stage. Both he and Minji would need to work through the night. Their usual babysitter was sick. Could Taewon possibly? He knew he should refuse. The council's warning had been clear. Instead, Taewon found himself at their door an hour later. "Thank you," Minji said, relief clear in her voice. "We wouldn't ask, but this test could change everything." "It's no trouble," Taewon assured her. "Jiwoo and I will have a good evening." After her parents left, Jiwoo looked up at Taewon with serious eyes. "Are you in trouble because of us?" Taewon blinked in surprise. "What makes you think that?" "I heard you talking on your phone the other night." The old dragon sounded angry. Children and their keen ears, Taewon thought. "The other dragons think I should spend less time with your family and more time doing my job." Jiwoo considered this as being my friend, not part of your job. Taewon smiled. "Not officially, no. But you still came tonight." "Yes," Taewon said softly. "I did." Jiwoo nodded, as if this confirmed something important. "Mom says sometimes you have to break small rules to follow bigger ones." "Your mother is very wise," Taewon said. "Now, would you like to hear about the time the time a dragon visited the ocean world of Nereus?" Later that night, after Jiwoo had fallen asleep, Taewon stood by the window looking out at the city. His communication device chimed again. He expected another warning from the council, but instead, it was a message from the science complex. The test had succeeded. Earth's first FTL signal had been sent and received. It was a small step, but a crucial one. Humanity was one step closer to true galactic citizenship. Taewon smiled. Perhaps this was why he had been drawn to this family. Perhaps this was what dragons were meant to do, not just observe younger species, but help them grow. As he looked at the sleeping child, Taewon made his decision. The council could disapprove all they wanted. He would continue to watch over this family, to be their unexpected guardian. Some bonds, he was learning, were stronger than ancient traditions. 6 months had passed since Taewon first found Jiwoo in that alley. The Park family's life had changed dramatically in that time, with Taewon's subtle help. Doyeon and Minji's FTL communication project had advanced faster than anyone expected. They had been given a larger lab, more staff, and most importantly, more reasonable working hours. This meant more time with Jiwoo, who was flourishing. Her school reports showed improvement, and the sad, lonely look that had once shadowed her eyes was gone. Taewon had continued to visit despite the Dragon Council's growing disapproval. He had received 3 formal warnings, but each time, he had found ways to justify his involvement with the family. The project was diplomatically significant. Cultural exchange was valuable. The humans were providing important insights, all true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that Taewon had come to care deeply for this small human family. In his thousands of years, he had never formed such a bond with any beings outside his own kind. On a cool autumn evening, Taewon received an unexpected call from Minji. "We've had a breakthrough," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "The director wants us to run a full-scale test tonight. We need to go back to the lab." "What about Jiwoo?" Taewon asked. That's why I'm calling. Our regular sitter can't come on such short notice. Would you? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Taewon said without hesitation. When he arrived at their apartment, he found Jiwoo already dressed in her coat. Mom says I get to see the lab tonight, she said, bouncing with excitement. Taewon looked at Minji questioningly. The test will take hours to set up, she explained. We thought Jiwoo could see the lab, then you could take her to the family room to sleep. It has comfortable couches, and it's far from the testing area. Doyeon appeared from the bedroom, carrying a small bag. We packed her pajamas and some books. The security team knows you're coming. The science complex was unusually busy for the late hour. Scientists and technicians hurried through the corridors, their faces showing a mix of excitement and tension. This test was important, perhaps the most important in human history. Jiwoo held Taewon's hand tightly as they followed her parents through security checkpoints. The guards nodded respectfully to Taewon, recognizing his diplomatic credentials. The main lab was enormous, a cavernous room filled with equipment that hummed and blinked. At its center stood a large circular platform surrounded by curved panels that reached toward the ceiling. This is where the magic happens, Doyeon told Jiwoo, lifting her up to see better. It's not really magic, she replied seriously. It's science, like in Taewon's stories. Minji laughed. That's right. We're trying to make a telephone that can call across the stars. After showing Jiwoo around the main areas, Doyeon led them to a comfortable room with sofas, a small kitchen, and a television. You'll be safe here, he told Jiwoo, kissing her forehead. Be good for Taewon. When will you be done? She asked. Late, Minji said. You'll probably be asleep, but we'll come get you as soon as we finish. After her parents left, Jiwoo explored the room while Taewon prepared a small dinner from the food they had brought. They ate together, and then Jiwoo changed into her pajamas. Will you tell me a dragon story? She asked as she settled on the sofa with her blanket. Taewon smiled. Of course. He was halfway through a tale about dragon hatchlings learning to fly when his enhanced senses detected something wrong. A smell sharp and chemical that shouldn't be there, and underneath it, a subtle vibration in the floor. Taewon stopped mid-sentence. What's wrong? Jiwoo asked. I'm not sure, he said, rising to his feet. Stay here for a moment. He stepped into the hallway and extended his senses further, pushing past the limits of his human form. There are 3 floors below, movement that didn't match the patterns of the scientists. And something else, the distinctive energy signature of weapons not approved for Earth. Taewon's blood went cold. The complex was under attack. He rushed back into the room. Jiwoo, we need to go find your parents, right now. The little girl must have heard the urgency in his voice, because she didn't question him. She simply nodded and reached for her shoes. Leave them, Taewon said, and stay very close to me. He lifted her into his arms and moved into the corridor. The emergency lights had activated, bathing everything in a pulsing red glow. In the distance, he could hear shouting. What's happening? Jiwoo whispered, her arms tight around his neck. I think some bad people are trying to stop your parents' work, Taewon said, keeping his voice calm. But I won't let them hurt you or your family. He moved swiftly through the complex, avoiding the main corridors. His diplomatic access allowed him to open doors that would normally be locked. As they got closer to the main lab, the sounds of conflict grew louder. Taewon set Jiwoo down behind a large equipment cabinet. Stay here, he instructed. Don't move until I come back for you. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, he said gently. But remember what I told you about dragons, that they protect what's precious to them. She replied, exactly, and you and your parents are very precious to me. Taewon slipped around the corner and assessed the situation. 6 figures in dark clothing were in the main lab. They had neutralized the security team and were holding the scientists at gunpoint. Doyeon and Minji stood protectively in front of their equipment, facing a tall figure who appeared to be the leader, the plans and all copies. The leader was saying, now, or we start shooting your colleagues. Taewon recognized the voice. It belonged to a representative from a rival alien faction that had opposed Earth's admission to the Galactic Alliance. They fear human advancement, especially in communication technology that would give Earth equal standing. He had to act quickly, but if he revealed himself as a dragon, he would be breaking the highest law of his people. Dragons never showed their true form to other species except in the most formal diplomatic settings. A scientist cried out as one of the attackers struck him. Minji moved to help but was roughly pushed back. Taewon made his decision. He stepped into the open doorway. "Release them," he commanded, his voice carrying the natural authority of a dragon king. All heads turned toward him. The diplomat, the leader, sneered, "This doesn't concern you or your kind. Dragons prefer to watch, not act. Everyone knows this, not this time," Taewon said. He began to change. His human form melted away like mist. His body elongated, growing larger and more powerful. Scales the color of midnight spread across his skin, gleaming with an inner light. His face transformed, becoming longer, with features both reptilian and noble. Great wings unfurled from his back, spanning the width of the lab, where a man had stood moments before. Now towered a dragon not at his full size, which would have destroyed the building, but large enough to fill the humans with awe and the attackers with terror. "Run!" Taewon growled, his voice like thunder. The attackers fired their weapons, but the energy blasts bounced harmlessly off Taewon's scales. With a sweep of his tail, he knocked 3 of them unconscious. The others fled, but Taewon was faster. Within moments, all 6 were subdued. The scientists stared in shock. Doyen and Minji looked not surprised, but worried. "Jiwoo," Minji gasped. "Where is she?" "Safe," Taewon assured them, his voice rumbling in his dragon form. "I hid her before confronting these intruders." As security forces finally arrived, Taewon began to shift back to his human appear. The effort was tremendous after such a complete transformation. He staggered slightly as the change completed. Doyen caught his arm. "You revealed yourself," he said quietly. "For us." Taewon nodded, too exhausted to speak. "Taewon," a small voice called out. Jiwoo had left her hiding place and was running toward them. As the little girl threw her arms around him, Taewon knew that his life as a dragon diplomat was over. The council would never forgive this breach of their most sacred law. But looking at the family he had saved, the family that had somehow become his own, he couldn't bring himself to regret his choice. Some things were worth the sacrifice. News of what happened at the science complex spread quickly. By morning, every news outlet on Earth was reporting the same incredible story. A dragon had revealed its true form to save human scientists from attackers. For 3 days, Taewon remained in his diplomatic quarters, waiting for the Dragon Council's judgment. His communication device stayed silent, which worried him more than any immediate punishment. Dragons were patient creatures. Their anger could simmer for centuries. On the 4th day, his door chimed. When he opened it, he found not the council representatives he expected, but Doyen, Minji, and Jiwoo. "May we come in?" Doyen asked. Taewon stepped aside, surprised. "How did you get past security? We have some influence now," Minji said with a small smile. "Being saved by a dragon makes people listen to you." Jiwoo ran to Taewon and hugged his legs. "Are you in trouble?" she asked, looking up at him. Taewon knelt to her level. "Yes, little one. I broke the most important rule of my people. Because of us," Doyen said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Because it was the right thing to do." Taewon corrected him. "I made my choice freely." Minji sat on one of Taiwan's sleek diplomatic chairs. "The Galactic Alliance representatives have been meeting non-stop since the attack. They want us to testify about what happened." "All of us," Doyen added, looking meaningfully at Taewon, "including you." Taewon shook his head. "I doubt the Dragon Council will allow it." As if summoned by his words, his communication device chimed. The stern face of Elder Suho appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Taewon," the elder said, his ancient eyes unreadable, "the council has reached its decision. You are to appear before the Galactic Alliance High Court tomorrow. After you have given your testimony, you will return to our homeworld to face judgment for your actions." The screen went dark before Taewon could respond. Jiwoo tugged at his hand. "What does that mean?" "It means I have to go away for a while," Taewan said gently. "Will you come back?" she asked. Taewan couldn't bring himself to lie to her. "I don't know." The next day, the High Court of the Galactic Alliance convened in a grand chamber built specifically for interspecies meetings. Representatives from 27 different worlds sat in tiered seats around a central floor. Humans, being the newest members, had seats near the back. Taewan entered alone, dressed in formal dragon diplomatic attire, a simple robe of material that shifted colors like oil on water. He kept his head high, showing the pride of his ancient race. The proceedings began with testimony from security officers and scientists who had witnessed the attack. Then Doyen and Minji were called to speak. They described not just the night of the attack, but the months before, how Taewan had helped their family, guided their research, and formed a bond with their daughter. "In our culture," Minji said, her voice clear and strong, "we have a concept called family by choice. Ambassador Taewan became part of our family by choice. His actions were not just those of a diplomat, but of someone protecting his family." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Such relationships between species were rare, especially involving dragons. Finally, Taewan was called to testify. As he walked to the center of the floor, he saw the Dragon Council members watching from their special section. 7 ancient dragons in human form, their eyes cold and judging. "Ambassador Taewan," the Chief Justice said, "you stand accused of violating the Dragon Non-Interference Protocol by revealing your true form to humans outside of sanctioned diplomatic settings. How do you respond?" Taewan took a deep breath. "I acknowledge my actions. I chose to reveal my true nature to save lives that are precious to me. If that is a crime among my people, then I accept the consequences. The law exists for a reason." Elder Suho called out, "Dragons have power that can overwhelm younger species. We must remain distant and neutral to allow them to find their own path." "With respect, Elder," Taewan replied, "I have lived among humans for only a short time, but I have learned something important from them. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from connection, not distance." The debate continued for hours. Other species offered their perspectives. Some supported the dragon's traditional stance of non-interference. Others argued that times were changing and old laws needed to evolve. Throughout it all, Taewan stood firm. He did not regret his choice. As the court prepared to adjourn for deliberation, a small commotion broke out near the human section. A child's voice rang out clearly in the momentary silence. "Wait, I want to talk to." All heads turned to see Jiwoo, who had somehow slipped away from her parents and was now standing at the edge of the central floor. The Chief Justice looked surprised but nodded. "Approach." Young human, Jiwoo walked to the center of the floor, looking tiny among the grand architecture and assembled dignitaries. She stopped beside Taewan and took his hand. "My name is Jiwoo Park," she said, her voice small but steady. "Taewan is my friend. He tells me stories about the stars and helps me with my homework. He makes my mom and dad happy because they don't worry about me when he's there." She looked up at the Dragon Council. "He showed me his dragon self before the bad people came. He trusted me with his secret because we're friends. That's not bad, is it?" Elder Suho's stern expression softened slightly. "Child, there are reasons for our laws that you cannot understand. I understand that Taewan saved us." Jiwoo replied simply, "And I understand that friends help each other. If you take him away forever, you're being mean for no reason." A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the chamber. The wisdom of children, delivered without diplomacy, often cut to the heart of matters. The court adjourned for deliberation. Taewan and the Park family waited together in a small room, saying little. There was nothing left to say. They had all spoken their truths. 3 hours later, they were called back. The Chief Justice stood. "This case has forced us to examine traditions that have existed for millennia. The Dragon Non-Interference Protocol has served the galaxy well, but perhaps it is time for evolution." He turned to Taewan. "Ambassador Taewan, you violated the letter of dragon law, but many believe you honored its spirit, the protection of life and the fostering of understanding between species." Elder Suho rose. "The Dragon Council has reached a compromise. Taewan will be removed from his diplomatic post." Jiwoo gasped, squeezing her mother's hand. However, the elder continued, he will be appointed to a new position, Guardian of Earth's FTL Communication Project and Cultural Liaison to the Park family. Murmurs of surprise filled the chamber. This will serve as a test case. The Chief Justice explained. A new form of interspecies relationship, one based on connection rather than distance. If successful, it may lead to changes in how all species interact within the alliance. Taewon bowed deeply to the court and the Dragon Council. I accept this honor and responsibility. Later that evening, as stars appeared over Seoul, the Park family and Taewon sat on the roof of their apartment building. Jiwoo was pointing out constellations she had learned from Taiwan's stories. So you're officially part of our family now, she asked, something like that. Taewon said with a smile, I believe the human term is godfather. Doyeon laughed. Dragon godfather, that's certainly a first. The first of many new things, Minji said. Looking up at the stars, our FTL system will be operational within a year. Humans will be able to speak instantly across the galaxy, and dragons will be a little less distant, Taewon added, a little more connected. Jiwoo leaned against his side, yawning. Will you tell me a new story? About what happens next? Taewon looked at the small human family that had somehow changed everything. For him, for dragons, perhaps for the galaxy itself, all because he had heard a child cry and decided to help. The next story, he said softly, is one we'll write together. Above them, the stars shimmered like scales on a dragon's back, ancient and unchanging. But between those stars, new connections were forming, invisible lines drawing together worlds that had always been separate. A new constellation was taking shape in the galaxy, and at its heart was a family to human scientists, their brave daughter, and a dragon who had learned that some bonds transcend even the oldest laws.